Every gardener knows the struggle of watching soil turn lifeless. Crops stall, earthworms vanish, and no matter how much compost you add, it feels like the ground has lost its spark. Fertilizers may give a temporary boost, but they don't bring the soil back to life. What most gardeners don't realize is that our forefathers had a trick for this, a simple brew using compost and molasses that wakes up the hidden world of microbes. When I poured this brew onto my raised beds, the results were undeniable. Within days, the soil smelled richer, broke apart more easily, and worms returned in numbers I hadn't seen before. It's one of the simplest tools you can make at home, and it outperforms bags of compost when speed is the goal. Let's go step by step, breaking down why this works, how to brew it, and the best way to apply it so your garden soil comes alive again. Molasses is the energy source microbes crave. The foundation of this trick lies in molasses, a byproduct of sugar refining that farmers once used regularly in soil tonics. Molasses is loaded with simple sugars, minerals, and trace nutrients that microbes digest instantly. Unlike raw scraps that take time to break down, molasses feeds the microbial population directly, creating an explosion in activity. When microbes multiply, they don't just eat. They create enzymes, acids, and compounds that unlock nutrients from soil particles. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium locked away in clay suddenly become available to roots. Beneficial bacteria crowd out pathogens, and fungal networks expand faster. By giving microbes an immediate food source, you create conditions that fertilizers can't reproduce. The base starts with a compost tea. The brew begins with compost tea, which is basically an extract of compost steeped in water. The idea isn't just to pull nutrients from the compost, but to capture the microbial community living in it. A good compost tea is, just teeming with bacteria, fungi, and protozoa that colonize soil as soon as they're introduced. To make the base, you'll need 5 gallons of non-chlorinated water, ideally rainwater or well water. If you're using tap water, let it sit uncovered for 24 hours to allow chlorine to evaporate. Add 2 cups of finished, mature compost to the water. This could be from your pile, vermicompost from worms, or even leaf mold. Stir vigorously to oxygenate the mixture. For the best results, place the compost in a mesh bag and suspend it in the water like a giant tea bag. This lets the microbes leach out without too much sediment, which is pretty handy. The ratio is simple, 2 cups of compost per 5 gallons of water. That's strong enough to seed billions of microbes without going anaerobic. Now comes the step that turns plain compost tea into a soil revival brew. Add 1 tablespoon of unsulfured blackstrap molasses per gallon of water. For a 5-gallon bucket, that's 5 tablespoons. Unsulfured molasses is important because sulfur can suppress microbial life. As soon as molasses enters the tea, bacteria begin consuming the sugars and multiplying at a pace you can measure in hours. The brew goes from a mild compost smell to a rich, earthy sweet aroma. Frothing or bubbling on the surface is a sign of active fermentation. This microbial bloom is exactly what worms and plant roots are drawn to. If you want to take it further, you can add a pinch of powdered kelp or, a handful of alfalfa meal for trace minerals. But honestly, the basic combination of compost and molasses is powerful on its own. For this method to work, microbes must stay aerobic. Without oxygen, anaerobic bacteria take over, and instead of beneficial life, you end up with a foul-smelling liquid that actually harms plants. Traditional farmers didn't have air pumps, but they stirred the brew several times a day to keep oxygen circulating. The goal is to keep the liquid oxygen-rich so beneficial microbes thrive. After about 24 to 48 hours, the tea is at its peak. Beyond that, the population begins to crash as food is consumed. Timing is everything. Apply when the brew is freshest. Once your brew is alive and active, it's ready to go straight into the soil. Strain out solids through a mesh bag or old cloth if you're using a sprayer, or apply directly with a watering can if pouring. The application ratio is 1 gallon of brew per 10 square feet of raised bed or garden soil. Drench the soil thoroughly so the microbes seep into the root zone. The goal isn't just to feed the top layer but to allow microbes to migrate down into tunnels and pores where roots need them most. If you're reviving a particularly lifeless bed, you'll want to repeat the drench once a week for about 3 weeks and then switch to doing it once a month for maintenance. For foliar use, just dilute the brew to half strength and spray it onto the leaves in the early morning or late afternoon. Within days of application, the soil actually starts to behave differently. You'll notice that moisture retention improves as microbial activity builds structure. Soil aggregates form, holding both air and water in balance. If you dig lightly after 5 to 7 days, you'll see more worm tunnels, lighter soil texture, and a smell that indicates living biology, sweet, earthy, not sour. Crops begin responding as nutrient release increases, often showing greener growth and stronger stems within 2 weeks. This is not a one-time miracle but a kickstart. The goal is to wake the soil so that ongoing organic matter additions, mulch, compost, cover crops continue the cycle. Some gardeners ask why not just add compost directly. The difference is speed and bioavailability. Compost takes months to break down and requires a critical mass to heat up and process properly. So, think of compost as, well, a pantry of food and compost tea with molasses as a hot meal served to the microbes. One is stored energy while the other is, ready to eat. By feeding the microbes in liquid form, you give soil life, honestly, an instant advantage. While this brew is pretty powerful, it actually works best as part of a broader system. Always combine it with steady organic matter inputs like shredded leaves, straw, or even cover crops to keep those microbes fed for the long term. Avoid chemical fertilizers and pesticides, since they can really undo your work by wiping out microbial life. Rotate where you drench, so that all your beds receive equal treatment. Over time, you'll notice soil fertility stabilizing, requiring less outside input. Many gardeners find that after a season of monthly molasses tea applications, their need for compost drops by half and fertilizers become unnecessary. If your soil feels tired or if compost alone isn't cutting it, try this old-world brew. 5 gallons of water, 2 cups of compost, and 5 tablespoons of molasses. That's all it takes to supercharge your soil with microbes. Within days, you'll notice the difference, and within weeks, your garden will respond with vigor that no bag of fertilizer can match. Pour this simple molasses brew into your raised beds and let the microbes do the work. You'll see richer soil, healthier plants, and more life than you thought possible. For more tested soil revival methods and garden wisdom, subscribe to HydroHaven and share this video with fellow growers. The more gardeners who bring back these lost practices, the less dependent we all are on store-bought inputs. Let's return the soil to the living system it was meant to be.